Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're uncovering a really fascinating mirror between the microscopic physics of computer hardware and the macroscopic structure of human society. It's a tale of two very different systems, one where absolute rigid crystallization is our greatest technological asset, and another where that exact same rigidity becomes our most dangerous social trap. Okay, listen to this quote right from the architecture docs. It perfectly sets up our whole journey today. We are quite literally tricking rocks into thinking with lightning and text to perfectly automate our imagination. It's a beautiful, honestly almost poetic image. But really think about it. How do we actually force a physical rock to flawlessly execute the incredibly complex, completely chaotic desires of the human mind, without the logic just tearing itself apart? Section 1. Tempering the silicon crystals. To understand how we do this, we've got to go right down to the bare metal of the microchip. Notice the stark contrast between two very different mathematical engines inside a computer's physical brain. On one side, we have the FPU gambler. It's wildly fast, but it's probabilistic. It relies on secret, proprietary seed tables burned into the chip to essentially guess the math through lossy approximations. But on the exact opposite side is our hero, the ALU surveyor. It is strictly deterministic. It performs exact, verifiable arithmetic, where 1 + 1 is exactly 2 every single time, acting as this globally accountable universal witness. So, how do we cross this immense divide? From that fluid, messy, associative human thought to the exact, unyielding reality of hardware? Well, we have to temper our fuzzy logic into rigid crystals. We do this using structured text, which the sources call the semiotic bridge. Think of code, like JSON or Python, as a divine script. It's the one and only way to safely compile our boundless imagination into the strict, rigid execution of the ALU. And once we cross that bridge, we hit absolute exactness. To keep the system from just drifting off into mathematical chaos or hallucinating, it uses global remainder tracking. That's essentially keeping a perfect universal receipt of every single calculation. This achieves bit-perfect orientation, pinning down our exact location within the vast digital landscape and formalizing the math over discrete integers so absolutely everything stays perfectly accountable. Now here's the crazy part. This strict geometrical rigor, it actually unlocks a staggering metabolic hardware energy floor of just 0.05 picojoules per operation. To put that into perspective, by abandoning the messy guesswork of the FPU and relying on the exacting truth of the ALU, we prove that here, in the realm of silicon hardware, rigid crystallization isn't just beautiful, it's a massive virtue. It's wildly efficient. Section 2. Society's calcified caste system. But what happens when we zoom out? Down in the silicon, we literally need that rigid crystallization to function. But in human society, where fluidity and social mobility are absolutely crucial, sociological research shows us exactly what happens when social classes undergo calcification. It's a structural process where a theoretically open, achievement-based class system just hardens into an inescapable hereditary caste system. It's known as elite closure, the moment the social ladder is permanently pulled up and the fluid river of society freezes into a rigid grid. Looking impartially at the data, researchers like David Masse outline exactly how historic elites manage this shift. They successfully encash their inherited privilege, their historic caste capital, like land, networks, and wealth, and they cleverly repackage it. They turn it into modern, casteless merit, effectively hiding the historical mechanisms that put them on top in the first place. Satish Deshpande's paradigm of anonymity perfectly charts this dynamic. The top tier gets to enjoy this unmarked universal status. They navigate society anonymously, claiming pure merit. Meanwhile, the lower tiers? They remain hyper-visible. They're totally bound to their identity, forced to mobilize politically as marked exceptions, and they stay subject to durable systemic discrimination within closed networks. And the sources make it clear, historically, this wasn't an accident. It was a calculated economic strategy. Rupa Viswanath's research on racial capitalism shows that states and landowners found it way cheaper to lock in a cheap caste grid by tagging laborers by hereditary birth, rather than negotiating individual contracts. They literally bound land rights to hereditary, unfree labor, just locked it in to stabilize the system for their own benefit.
So, social calcification doesn't just happen. Dominant elites actively withdraw from fair competition using some very specific mechanisms. They cultivate social apartness, they practice strict elite endogamy, basically marrying only within their tier, and they monopolize cultural capital. And if a sector gets a little too democratic, they simply disinvest and move to new, unregulated frontiers. The fluid class hardens into a protective crystal.
Section 3. Shedding the rigid skid. All right, so how do we resolve this immense tension? How do we keep the exact reliable math of the ALU in our tools, but actively shed that awful social calcification? Well, first we have to look at the structural trap of our current digital network, the pipe. Think of this as those top-heavy centralized cloud landlords siphoning our daily data into a massive central tank. It traps us as digital tenants in a newly calcified tech hierarchy. But right on the heels of that, we have the alternative, which is the forest. This is a dynamic, constituent-owned topology that actually restores true pluralism. So instead of a massive central pipe, you get localized eddies where sovereign nodes can run their own data. It pushes intelligence and power away from that centralized trunk and shoves it directly out to the edges.
To build a concrete solution here and actually restore mobility, we follow a specific path. Number 1. Implement protocol and force visibility, using tools like an eGPL shell so creators actually own the rights instead of just handing them over to platforms. Number 2. Secure truth at the digital root using LIFO, last in, first out ledgers, so data can't be secretly overwritten by a central authority. 3. Push that strict deterministic execution of the ALU out to the extreme edge. And 4. Establish dynamic, permissionless local mobility for everyone. This whole approach brings us to leaf node logistics. This is the practice of opportunistically managing your own local state, your memory and your data execution out at the extreme edges, the leaves of the network. It's a total paradigm shift. It takes the exacting power of the ALU surveyor and hands it out to the absolute fringes of society. Because by executing math locally with autonomous agents, we actually prevent centralized cartels from locking down the system. The agentic forest ecosystem bypasses legacy tech gatekeepers entirely. It prevents elite closure through decentralized hardware ownership, eliminates that centralized pipe landlord, and literally executes flawless math right on your desk using things like a Cheerbot's GPIO pins. It actively restores an open, pluralistic grid of social and economic opportunity. The documentation captures this ultimate synthesis beautifully. It says, the human pilot applies the intent, but the agentic cell executes the sweat, bridging that massive gap between messy human desire and strict deterministic machine execution. It really proves that we humans remain the undeniably essential fluid architects, while the machines just handle the rigid, crystallized computational labor. We use the rigid crystals of our silicon to empower the fluid, mobile potential of human society. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. As we actively shed the calcified pipe for a dynamic, pluralistic forest, how will you wield the divine script to orchestrate your own sovereign reality at the edge? The tools are wide open. The bridge is built. What magnificent reality are you going to orchestrate today? Keep exploring, and I'll see you next time.